Thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate seeing all your faces, some old friends and hopefully new friends. So basically, my name is Anna Swora. Anna, I didn't write down the Swora part, but I'm an astrologer. And I'm certified as a transpersonal counselor. And I have an MED and a BA in filmmaking. So before becoming a professional astrologer, I worked in film for 24 years as a producer for PBS and then television commercials. That experience taught me the ability of teamwork, and that would be the crew members, right? And the creative process within that teamwork. So it's all about interconnectedness and the creative process, and it was fabulous. I have found that some of the, that whole interconnection and creativity I apply to astrology, because astrology is about connecting with the client in a creative process as I observe their chart and interpret their chart. But it's always about asking a lot of questions, because you can't presume that the symbols of the planets and the way the whole system is set up, that it means one thing. It's never like that. It's a very complex system that holds a lot of different meanings. Okay, so my interest in astrology began in 1966, at the age of 15, when I first started reading the work of Mark Edmund Jones, the book was called Astrology, How and Why It Works, which I found in my local library. I was truly transfixed. I knew that, wow, this is something that I really, truly connect with and find joy in being involved with. I then moved on to books by other astrologers, Dane Rudger, Robert Hand, and Stephen Arroyo. My interest in psychological astrology, which is the approach that I take, I'm grounded in psychological astrology, peaked with the discovery of Liz Green's work, who is, she's still alive, a Jungian analyst who actually started an astrology school in London. My focus on psychological astrology was confirmed with the work of Glenn Perry, who is a psychotherapist who first was an astrologer. And what he discovered when he was working as an astrologer with his clients, he was tapping into some very deep psychological processes that his clients were experiencing. So he then went on and became a psychotherapist and then combined the astrology with the psychological. Back in the 90s, I entered therapy during a difficult transition in my life. In the process of my own psycho-spiritual or psycho-spiritual for short, healing, I developed a system of chart interpretation that incorporated my own therapeutic process. I used my chart as a guide for informing the process I was going through. I have been applying that method to chart interpretations for the past 25 years. The purpose of my readings is to reveal psychological complexes which may affect and influence our behavior within relationships, not only with others, but more significantly, the relationship we have with ourselves. Unconscious drives are at the root of the complex or complexes, taking on a life of their own and, in a sense, possessing us at times. The discomfort that we experience can lead to an inner healing guided by our ability to acknowledge what has triggered us, sometimes with the help of a therapist or counselor. This uprooting of unconscious drives and the healing process that may follow can lead to a greater self-awareness, which is what it's all about. It's about being aware of oneself in the moment, knowing that when we feel that uncomfortable feeling, we've been triggered, and that uncomfortable feeling is tied to one or two or three of our complexes, however it appears in the chart. And so what happens is then we experience this uncomfortable feeling and we know, wait a minute, I'm feeling uncomfortable, I've been triggered, and if we are self-aware, we know that we don't have to buy into that discomfort or that trigger. And that's the work of, and I will get to the aspects of self-awareness. So, let's see. So I found that the astrological chart can be an effective tool for exploring where these unconscious drives and complexes may reside, where the openings may be, and ultimately where we can experience a soul-level transformation. When doing a reading and as a counselor, I'd like to emphasize that it's critical to have a therapist to refer clients to who are going through a particularly challenging time and may or may not have a history of some type of trauma. Even though I'm trained in counseling, I don't have the skills to support a client who is going through a deep psychological process. During those times, I often refer my clients to a qualified therapist. Okay, so what is perennial astrology? This is a system, it's an astrological system that is about psycho-spiritual evolution or development. We come in with a unique sense of soul purpose. We also come in with positive and negative karmic complexes. So our work is to become self-aware of our positive and negative complexes and our soul purpose. The idea is to de-energize the negative and accentuate the positive, which all circulate around this sense of soul purpose. The negative can get in the way of evolving and can burden us. That's why perennial astrology is the most integrated astrological system, because it emphasizes self-awareness, which is important in our own evolution and development through the course of life. So when we consider the significant work of Aldous Huxley, who developed the perennial philosophy, his work addresses that we are all spiritual beings living in a physical body, and that we have come here as emanations or sparks of the divine ground to live a spiritually grounded life. The basic concepts of his philosophy can be broken down into 4 points. That matter is a manifestation of the divine ground, that humankind can experience the divine ground, that humankind possesses a phenomenal ego and an eternal self. Humankind's purpose is unity with the divine ground.
I'm sorry, who was this?
Aldous Huxley. He wrote. Oh, yeah.
He took LSD back in.
Yes. Yeah, he did. Yeah. No, it's part of his process for sure. I mean, he was very futuristic, too. So, this is the book, The Perennial Philosophy. You might be interested in exploring, reading. Okay. And let's move on. Okay, so the perennial philosophy is the grounding point of the perennial path. Okay? And the perennial path is the process of staying connected to our spiritual selves while we maneuver our lives through our positive and negative complexes. Over the years, I have worked in collaboration with Dr. John Amoroso, a clinical psychologist who is sitting right here to my left, who developed the perennial path, as well as a psychological model based in Carl Jung's idea of the complex. This psychological approach defines the karmic and biographical formation and function of both positive and negative complexes, themes, and their impact on one's pursuit of soul purpose, all of which is reflected in the astrological chart.
Would you just mind defining complex?
He wants me to define complex. Do you want to take that, John? Okay, I'll answer that. Okay, so we come in with positive and negative complexes. Okay, so once I get into the charts, which can reveal the complexes, then I think you'll understand a little bit better. Okay. So the perennial path is a spiritual practice that is not based in any specific religious tradition and is therefore not meant to displace any religious practice for those who are dedicated to a specific religious tradition. The perennial path is compatible and meant to enliven one's spiritual experience with that tradition. For those who have chosen to move away from traditional religion, the perennial path is designed to totally support one's evolutionary process of spiritual transformation. The perennial path is composed of 8 aspects, which are here, and 12 attributes, which I will get to, which are ways of being. The aspects, these are ways of practice, doing, okay, and the attributes are ways of being, okay, that together enable and support the practitioner in moving through the process of spiritual transformation and in moving to higher states of consciousness. It considers the physical, mental, and spiritual dimensions of the individual as it enlivens one's sense of interconnectedness through community and service to others. Okay. So the 8 aspects involve physical well-being, study, self-awareness, creativity, meditation, transpersonal awareness, relationship, and service. And by the way, what I want to add is that all of these concepts are in the astrological chart. So I address all of these within the chart. Okay, so aspect 1 is physical well-being, which involves preparing and maintaining the physical body so that we can open to the spiritual realm and be ready to embrace consciousness. And this involves, not only proper nutrition and exercise, but also includes the energetic fields emanating from the body through the chakras and through the auric fields. Okay, aspect 2 is study. This aspect has to do with observation and thinking about what comes to us regarding our spiritual psychological process. It starts with reading materials, which for me was Mark Edmund Jones's work and other books on astrology that provide insights into our psychological process, psycho-spiritual process. I am in a constant learning process, a process of study, each time I do an astrology reading. I learn something new around a known concept, and it is reinforced. I continue to read the works of other astrologers on an ongoing basis, which foster new insights into the depth of my readings. So other than reading books around what you're interested in, it's also about observing what's around you and studying what comes through, you see. And what we hear and see people doing, what thoughts and insights are stimulated in us, especially regarding our personal process. Okay, next one is self-awareness. And this is very critical because it really underpins everything that I'm talking about. Because if we're not self-aware, then we have a tough time negotiating a psycho-spiritual process. So, aspect 3 is the aspect of self-awareness. This is the realization of the true self, living at its highest potential. The true self then is free to live in full awareness of its spiritual nature, clear of karmic influences, psycho-emotional issues, complexes, and our positive and negative complexes, which are all evident in the astrological chart. And most importantly, living in full view and in sync with one's soul purpose. Reaching this level of consciousness first requires full awareness of the self as it is, full recognition of those positive and negative complexes. And then comes the clearing or release of those patterns of thinking, feeling, sensing, and behaving that blocked the natural spiritual connection. This aspect requires facing parts of the psyche, all of the personal collective karma, the darker aspects of our nature, the wounded subpersonalities that emerge from these dramatic life experiences. And our accepted life course is implied in our astrology. It means owning all of these dark and light parts of ourselves, which especially surface in our relationship with others. The surfacing and owning of these parts is followed by the hard work of releasing ourselves from the influence and control of these complexes and changing our way of being and interacting with the material plane. This requires opening to one's true life purpose, which has two aspects: self-nurturing and service to others. Now we move on to aspect 4, creativity. Along with free will, to maneuver this evolutionary movement to higher consciousness, we are endowed with the gift of creativity. It is this creative instinct that allows us to approach life circumstances, each in a unique way. With our creative instincts, we are allowed to build life experiences in very individualized ways, as we take prior experiences along with the current life circumstances to evolve into something totally new. So that's where that creative impulse plays out. So the objective of this practice is to enable the use of creativity in all aspects of our life experience, in relationships, work, play, learning, teaching, caring, and in moving to higher levels of consciousness. This all boils down to being innovative and problem solvers, all in the course of life. Aspect 5, meditation. The overall purpose of this aspect of practice is to open oneself to the liberating nature of the spiritual dimension and the practice of mindfulness or being in the moment. Aspect 6, transpersonal awareness. This aspect of practice fosters the movement into the transpersonal stages of awareness. It is first an awareness of the psychic level and the synchronicity that surfaces in the daily course of life. It is the recognition of an interconnection with nature, and then it is an awareness of the archetypal nature of the life process, a recognition of the play of archetypes, in a Jungian sense, the vision of Christ, the Blessed Virgin, the hero, the warrior, and the trickster. And then it is being open to that mystical connection and merging with the divine ground, and that state of consciousness of which the mystics speak. The practice involves persistently being aware of and in touch with the spiritual dimension, expecting it, watching for it, and always open to the miracle of that higher connection. It is through mindfulness, observation, and prayer that we undertake this aspect of the practice. The next aspect 7 is relationship. It is through the It is through the metaphor of relationship that we practice and explore that we realize and enact our inherent sense of interconnectedness with all and in the same, the divine. Now that's a quote written by Dr. John Amoroso. It's a beautiful quote. It's very symbolic of what I'm about to talk about. So the aspect of relationship is a process and practice of spiritual development. It is a practice in that our psycho-emotional issues, karmic patterns, and complexes are most commonly reflected in the way we engage in relationships. The process of realizing, working toward, enabling healthy relationships of all kinds then becomes a critical aspect in our movement to higher consciousness. And finally, aspect 8, service. As we move to higher consciousness toward the realization of the connection with the divine ground, we start to experience the transpersonal realm. With this transpersonal worldview comes a realization of our interconnectedness with our environment and with each other. Having focused on the personal work, on the personal inner work, the path now calls for the demonstration of the fruits of that labor through service to others. This aspect requires a sincere effort to be of service in the world, whether it is through the care of nature or the service of other beings. It is about enabling our own spiritual awareness by honoring the spiritual in others. So along with the 8 aspects, which are ways, as I said, of doing, there are 12 attributes. And attributes are ways of being. Okay, so we find mindfulness, creativity, non-attachment, interconnectedness, compassion, respect, responsibility, commitment, faith, honesty, gratitude, joy. And I think you have some little flyers that list those things too. Yeah. So those attributes are as follows. Mindfulness. Mindfulness requires being centered in the moment without anticipating the future or thinking about the past. This requires attention to what is now and then the right perception of what is now. In other words, what you're experiencing. Non-attachment results in a sense of freedom and liberation that comes from not wanting or desiring. It is not about detaching or making one separate, but about letting go of possessions, people, ideas, scripts, and complexes as substitute gratifications for our true nature, which is permanent and ever-present. Interconnectedness is the realization of our true nature of union with the divine ground and with all there is in our material reality. Compassion involves extending ourselves to all others in a non-judgmental and selfless way. Respect. The state of respect comes out of an acknowledgement of the sacred in all that is without and within. And responsibility. Okay, this is the focus is then on taking action for the spiritual development of self and all else. Holding oneself responsible for being self-aware around where one is on their spiritual path. Commitment implies the choice to invest energy into the pursuit of the spiritual path. It is the awareness and acceptance of self-determination and investments of effort that is elemental to this attribute. Faith is the unconditional knowing of one's inner connection with the divine ground. Honesty is being transparent and authentic in our interactions with the outside world. Gratitude is the expression of thanks that comes with the release from desire, aversion, and ignorance. Joy. The state of joy in the material reality implies the excitement and the bliss that is the true nature of the divine ground. It is the full expression of union and non-duality. Finally, creativity. The state of creativity is a way of being where you are trusting your natural instinct to be innovative and problem-solving. Okay, I want to stop here for 1 second. Okay, I have incorporated the perennial path in my readings, bringing, as I said earlier, the 8 aspects and 12 attributes included in the model. Each aspect can be found in the chart, and the openings, challenges to each one can be deciphered in a meaningful way, promoting movement towards a more purposeful life. As an astrologer, my method of interpreting the chart moves into 2 basic stages. The first stage is to look at the chart regarding the psycho-spiritual process revealed by the chart. That process includes the overlay of complex psychology to the chart itself. In particular, the aspect of self-awareness is grounded in complex psychology, which identifies positive and negative complexes. The aspect of self-awareness as an astrologer is a focal point for me when doing readings, so astrology becomes an important tool for reaching a greater level of self-awareness. The second stage that I work with is to look at the aspects and attributes, which can be found in the houses as well as the planets that rule those houses. By looking at those parts of the chart, we can then determine what the openings, positive complexes, and challenges, negative complexes, are. It's important to note that a positive complex can enhance our soul growth, or it can stunt it, as we take for granted our known talents and skills and not use them. By a similar process, a negative complex can bring about tremendous soul growth in one's lifetime, as challenges become opportunities for transformational change. Okay. And this is a very significant book that was written by Dr. Amoroso, which explains this, everything that I've just talked about, basically. It's a book about, it's called Awakening Past Lives, but what happens is when we learn, when past lives surface back into our psyche in a conscious way, we can then take that as a lesson of self-awareness. And so his book outlines positive and negative complexes and how they may be developed. And of course, we come in from other lifetimes with positive and negative complexes. We come in with talents and skills that we've worked on in other lifetimes. And we come in with negative complexes where, karmically we kind of made a mistake, and it, or something was done to us that created an imprint that becomes difficulty in moving forward on our path. So this, I recommend this book. And in the back of the book is a CD which you can listen to and take yourself on your own regression. So, yes.
Just in case there's people here who
Yes.
don't have a belief in past lives,
Yes.
it works just as well because the chart is a reflection of what the parents deliver that upward those same exact complexes.
Absolutely.
In the time.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And also people who are not into psychology, it works as well because even religiously, in honoring the father and the mother, it goes back to the spiritual ground.
Absolutely.
How it enters
Yeah.
personality.
Good point. Very good point.
Regardless of
I'm sorry, I missed that part. What was that? I'm sorry.
So the honoring is not about the person and what their character is as much as about the sacred ground and the delivery of that sacred, of who you really are.
Right, sure. That's really where we're all...
The model works for every model.
Yeah, very good. Good point. Okay, so where was I? So it's important to mention that there is no specific point in the chart that identifies soul purpose. Astrology is far more complicated than that. The whole chart, the integration of the whole chart, can give us a clue regarding the soul growth and soul purpose that the individual has come into this lifetime to work on. Only through dialoguing with the client, asking questions, can we begin to clarify the meaning of the complexion and the chart, and it's all revealed in the astrology. In other words, the whole chart is karmic, and the whole chart guides us to the potential discovery of one's soul purpose. So here we have, oh, wait a minute, I need to turn that off. Let's see if that'll do it. No.
Do you want me to block it with my head?
Good idea. No, I okay. So this is an example of actually a generic chart. This is not anyone's specific astrological chart. And what I want to do, for those of you, some of you apparently are connected to astrology, have some knowledge, or a lot of knowledge, and some of you don't. And so I just want to basically review the basics of astrology, okay? So, and while I do that, I will include where the aspects and the attributes fall into the chart itself.
Question. There's been a handout with Donald Trump and the Dalai Lama, among others, on our...
Right.
Can we follow what you're doing by looking at that too?
Yeah, eventually, I will get there. I will get to, he's actually next. Donald Trump is next. After I explain... Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll explain that. This is not a specific chart. This is a chart that helps to explain astrology itself. Okay? In very general terms. Okay? So, what we have here is we start with the fact that we have 12 houses in the chart. And the houses are the environment in which the planets play out. It's been likened to a stage that the actors are playing on. And so here we have house 1. Okay. I want to mention that this horizontal line right here intersects the whole chart in half. Okay, so right here we have essentially what's called the ascendant, or the moment of birth. Okay, and what's interesting is that the first house is all about consciousness. It's all about discovering who I am, me, myself, and I. Right above it is the 12th house. Okay, it goes 1 through 12. The 12th house is the in utero perinatal phase. And this is when we are attached to mom, mother, and, we subsist from her. Everything is happening unconsciously. So when we're born, we cross this line, and in that moment that we cross this line, we take our first breath and we become conscious. This is why that first house is very significant, because it begins to inform, depending on how that appears in a specific chart, informs kind of what we've come here to do on a birth level, on a conscious level. The 12th house then holds other lifetime. It holds the collective unconscious, and it holds our personal unconscious. So this is a very significant house because it is important to access when we're going through a psycho-spiritual process. And the ways that we access the 12th house is through altered state work, past life regression, meditation, dream work, and writing. Writing is a way to access the unconscious. When we just sit down and do automatic writing, or just write in our journals, that's a way to tap into our unconscious. Okay, so this first house is ruled by Aries, the first astrological sign. Aries is ruled by Mars, which is all about doing and taking action and being proactive. And it's a fire sign. So there are 3 fire signs. The first one is called primal fire. Okay. Now the aspects that involves the first house, the aspect is self-awareness, which kind of makes sense because we're coming in and being conscious. So we're self-aware. The attribute is mindfulness and honesty. Okay, it's hard to be dishonest when you're being true to yourself. And mindfulness is about being in the moment and being fully present with oneself. Then we move to the second house quickly. The second house is ruled by the sign of Taurus, which is ruled by the planet Venus. Okay, so the second house has to do with our values and what we value in life on the material plane, but then I interpret it as what we value on the spiritual level. And we have the attributes of self-awareness, because if we don't know what we value, then it's difficult to be self-aware. And then gratitude. And gratitude is about being grateful for our material things, which falls in the second house, but also grateful for the spiritual things that we've acquired, our values and our level of spirituality. Third house is ruled by Gemini, the sign of Gemini. Mercury rules that. Mercury is the planet of communication. And there's no aspect that is attributed to the third house, but there is, what is it? I'm having trouble seeing. Right. This is about self-awareness again. And study. Study is very critical. Study is about, as I explained earlier, the third house has to do with how we communicate, what we read, what we write about, and the level is on an elementary level, elementary school. Directly opposed the third house is the ninth house, which is about education, but a higher order thinking. This is where we get our graduate degrees. The third house opposing that is where we experience elementary school. So if anyone in particular has some kind of, difficult aspect in that third house, then almost always, I ask, well, did you experience any difficulty in grade school? And almost always, oh yeah, I was diagnosed with dyslexia and so forth. So then we move on to the fourth house. This is a very significant house because this house holds the family of origin. It holds the parental marriage. It holds family. So the relationship is very significant, the aspect of relationship. And it's ruled by the moon. And the moon is all about our feelings and our home and family. Here we have the fifth house, which is the house of creativity and performance and having fun and enjoying life and through the arts and performances and creativity. And it's also the house of children because we create our children. It's a social house, and it's ruled by, Leo, the sign Leo rules it, and that means that the sun is involved because Leo is ruled by the sun. And then we have joy. The fifth house is all about having fun and enjoying yourself, going out on dates, going to the theater, going out to dinner. This is all part of, and the creative process, the joy that we find when we do works of art. And so this is creativity on an individual level. This is where we, an artist stands in front of a canvas and paints by himself. His relationship or her relationship is with the canvas, one-on-one, across. And I guess what I'm trying to point out here is that the opposite house is always connected to the house on this side. So this would be creativity in a group setting, teamwork, okay? Aquarius. Aquarius is about other people and other groups. And so we find this level of creativity inherent in this house, the 11th house. Then we find the 6th house. This is the house of service, okay? But it's also the house of the physical body and work, right? Our daily routines. And we can't do our daily routines without being healthy. And so the planet, or the sign of Virgo and the planet Mercury rules that environment. And then we move to the house of relationships. And of course, I already mentioned that the 4th house, which is the relationship we have with our families, and our relationships that we experience in childhood. Now we move into another stage of relationships here, which is marriage and business associates. And, if you're a therapist, it would be your relationship with your client is found in here. Then we move to the, so that involves the attribute of interconnectedness, which I think speaks for itself, and then relationship, the aspect of relationship. Scorpio, 8th house. This is a very fascinating house because Scorpio in and of itself is a fascinating energy. Scorpio energy is ruled by the planet Pluto. And Pluto holds everything that we repress that is wounding and traumatic and holds our negative complexes. But the beauty of Pluto, once it surfaces into consciousness, then we do some very, very intense work to heal, and then, it becomes a psycho-spiritual healing process. We all have Pluto in our charts. We all have Scorpio in our charts. And we should honor and respect that energy because it is what gives birth to a new self. We're always in a process of transformation. And we have to destroy things in our bodies, in ourselves, in order to clear, cleanse, and let go, so that we can then incorporate a new self. And then we have Sagittarius, the 9th house. This is a fun house because it's all about learning. And it's all about, if you like to interconnect or integrate knowledge, then you have fun in this house. And this, as I said earlier, this is graduate school. This is, or college itself, where you take a course and, oh wow, I can connect that with another course that I'm taking. And then you start to build a knowledge base that's fun and exciting and is, very rewarding and enjoyable. And this is also the house of publishing. So that once we start to integrate knowledge and we think, wow, I've got something going here, I have a system or a theory that is based in a lot of things that I become knowledgeable about and then integrate it, and then we may have the urge to write about it, because this is also higher levels of writing, and then publish it. Okay, then we move to, okay, this house. This is a very significant house because this is the house that we present to the public. Okay, this is our profession, our career. This is me standing up here talking to you. I'm operating from my 10th house as I speak to you. The sign is Capricorn. Capricorn is a very hardworking, ambitious, and organized sign. And we have to be organized in order to do well in our professions and our careers. And so I did mention Aquarius as being creativity on a group level. Okay, so that basically is the generic chart. Okay, so we're ready to move on. What you see projected here is Donald Trump's chart, or President Trump. And so when looking at his astrological chart, we can see his personality traits mapped out by the planets and how they are positioned. He has been identified by psychologists as having narcissistic personality disorder and a high degree of impulsivity. Each of those traits can be seen in different parts of the chart. His narcissistic tendencies are symbolized by the planet Mars, which falls right on the birth line or ascendant, right there. His narcissism is summarized by having his name on all these buildings, self-referencing in speeches and conversations, and at his father's funeral, he spoke mainly about himself, about how his father's greatest achievement was raising a brilliant, renowned son. He has a phobia of germs and being repulsed by bodily fluids, especially women's. That's a function of this planet here, Pluto, in the 12th house. He has a fear of contagious parasites, poisons, and impurities. An example, the quote about Megan Fox, which we all know, blood coming from wherever. In his second house, the planets Neptune, right here, and you have it in your chart, I don't have it up here, Chiron is the most vulnerable place in the chart. And its meaning is that it's where we've come in wounded. And the work is to face our vulnerabilities. It's always important. If we don't face our vulnerabilities, then we can't move on. We stay stuck and we keep denying, over and over again, that, we've got this issue. So, oh, yes.
I am noticing that while you're showing us his natal chart, here on our table we have something called the natal chart.
Right.
Is there a difference?
No. Yeah. Does it say Donald Trump?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, let's see. They're almost identical, and what's missing is Chiron. It's just a different software that I was able to put in PDF form. You can't do it with that software. So as I was saying, up here, or right here, he has the planet Jupiter. And Jupiter actually expands anything that it's involved with. So here we have this configuration symbolizing, he's an aggressive decision maker who desires to create the strongest, tallest result. That's a function of Jupiter right here. And it's a negative complex, or it's a positive complex. I mean, it depends on how, he certainly thinks it's a positive complex. But he never thinks twice of the collateral damage that he leaves behind. So he's tough, he's threatening, and he's explosive. And that falls up here in the 10th house. Remember, this is the house of how one appears to the public. So this planet here, Uranus or Uranus, all different ways of saying it, is the planet of instability and erraticism. Things happening accidentally, all of a sudden, out of the blue. You know, you have a car accident. Well, that's a Uranian event. And then we know about his tweets early in the morning, right? Uranus symbolizes the internet, okay, and Twitter. So here he is. His identity, his sun, is connected to this very erratic planet, unstable, Uranus. Okay, and so the psychoanalytic theorist Heinz Kohut argued that narcissism stems from a deficiency in early life. The parents fail to lovingly reflect back the child's own need for validation, leaving the child in desperate need of affirmation from others. Narcissistic motivations cover up an underlying insecurity. So, in astrology, the moon, right here, represents the mother, feelings, and sense of home. And in Donald Trump's chart, we see that it is opposing what I just talked about, the sun and Uranus, his impulsivity, right? But it also represents that the mother and the father had a split within the marriage. You know, a sun opposing moon is usually starts out that way. The work, this is why astrology readings are so significant, because if I were doing a reading for Donald Trump, I would say, well, what are your feelings about your parents' marriage? And then he would respond, and I would say, well, have you learned how to bring your feelings together with your identity? Have you integrated that imprint that kind of dynamic would occur? Okay, so, yes?
Do you have any predictions of what might happen in the year?
Well, the only thing that I can predict, I don't like to do predictions. What I do is I talk about the potential of what may happen, because we have free will and we make decisions, and those decisions then affect and influence that planetary. Because, well, it's a good question, because here's his chart, his core chart, but then the planets continue to move, and they move around this chart, right? They're called transits. And so, depending on what planet is hitting the moon, and actually it's a good question, because I know that the planet Saturn, transiting Saturn, is right with his moon right now. Which means he's, on some level, he's working out his mother issues. And that's kind of evident with the marriage with Melania. I mean, they're separate. It's based in the fact that she wants to have their son, continue school in New York, but they're still apart, and that's a function of that separation, that dynamic, which he experienced with his parents. So we then repeat the same patterns unless we integrate and we transform, heal. We have to do the psychological work in order to bring those two planets together and integrate. And that's just part of his chart. And I have to say, we all have complexes in our charts. We all have challenges. And it's really good to know what our challenges are. And almost always, when someone comes to me for a reading, they're experiencing something that's hitting transit-wise. A planet is moving around and hitting on a very challenging complex in their charts. So it's fascinating to me. Okay. So this Saturn, with Saturn transiting his moon, that was a very good question. But he also has Saturn in a difficult aspect to his moon, which represents the fact that there was a restricted relationship with his mother. And this is a negative complex. And it also indicates being wounded by her and women in general, which may be the cause of how he objectifies women. So, this is an important complex of his. The fact that he has the sun in the 10th house, which I referred to, that's at the top of that's the circle with the dot in the middle, that's the sun. He's been in the public eye for many, many years. That's a function of that. And then, he communicates, his Mercury, Saturn, and Venus all fall in the 11th house of groups. So his family is a group, it supports his businesses, and even, the way he chose his cabinet. He has to rely on them as opposed to making his own decisions, because he has an aspect in his chart that indicates a vacuous thinking, okay? Superficial thinking. He doesn't go into the depths of issues, okay? So it's all superficial. His favorite words are tremendous, amazing, and that's it. He doesn't explain why is it tremendous, why is it amazing. So, okay, good question. And because he has Pluto in the 12th and the other planet Mars in the 12th, he's got to do some deeper psychological work. He's repressed, he's pushed down a lot of his issues. And based on your question, I think it's all going to fall in his face, because he can't keep up this impulsive lying that he's been doing. Yes?
Well, actually, to clarify Kathy's question, because we were looking at all the charts, we're grateful that you have on the table.
Yeah.
She's telling you that the total imbalance to the left, as compared to someone that has
right, and I'm okay, and I explain that by letting you know that what that means. And it means that he's very much in the public eye, and that he's very connected to the collective, to all people. Even before he became president, he was, what's it called? Famous TV personality, so he's always been connected to the public, and that would be the other side of the chart.
Assuming someone's born that way then, because of the way the chart is.
Well, it's really the opportunity that you have. It's all opportunity. And it's all a matter of doing the work. If we don't do the psychological work, then we can't reap the benefits of the chart that we've come in with. And I don't want to really get into something overly esoteric around that, because we kind of have to move on. But do you have any other questions around that?
Just saying, can you alter that pattern?
Oh, okay. All right, good question. So the chart is not static, okay? No, it's not. Astrology is so complex, I have to say, that when we are born, the moment we're born, then another chart is created called the progress chart. And that changes all the time, okay? And so me for instance, okay, I was born with the sun in Aquarius, but now I have the sun in Aries along with a lot of other planets in Aries. And that's a big difference. I mean, that becomes, Aries is all about, as I pointed out, self-focus, right? But also ambition and drive. And Aquarius is all about, the group, the individuals in a group, and friends, and futuristic, unorthodox thinking. And astrology is ruled by the 11th house. Yeah, so... Yeah, okay. Joe, how much more time do we have? Well, I'd like to do Oprah's chart. And then we'll do around, okay, yeah. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so up here, and you have her chart on the table, excuse me, and you have her chart up here, and I will point to different things. So Oprah's background, she had a difficult childhood. I'm sure many of you know that. She experienced trauma at the hands of her biological mother, who left her in the care of her grandmother shortly after her birth. When in the care of her grandmother, who taught her how to read and write by the age of 3, Oprah's chart indicates positive influences along with the difficult times in childhood. In other words, positive complexes and negative complexes. Because she could read and write at an early age, she began to speak publicly in her church and became known as the little speaker or the preacher. And this is a function in her chart of, let me find it, this and right here. Okay, so this is, right here is the planet Neptune. Neptune is the most spiritual planet within astrology. It represents transcendence, okay? And it's in a very positive aspect to the planet Jupiter, which, if you recall, I said anything that Jupiter's involved with, it expands. Okay, so here, Neptune representing, the spiritual realm, and Jupiter representing in the 10th house. Here she is, standing in front at a young age. It's a very lucky planet. And the fact that it's so well aspected, that's why she was able to stand up, have the guts and the confidence to lead the church congregation. That's a positive complex. So this talent for public speaking is symbolized by the planet Mercury, which is over here. And in your charts, you will see a triangle between Mercury, Jupiter, and Neptune. And that's a very fortuitous aspect. That's called a grand trine. And it's like a triangle, right? And so the planet Mercury is about communication, reading, and writing. So that is an indication of why that was such an important part of her childhood. The planet Mercury aspects the planet Jupiter, which is the most positive planet, which I just said. So Oprah's grandmother, now she was very poor. Grandmothers are found in the 12th house in a person's chart. This Pluto represents one of the representations of her childhood. They lived in an economically troubled neighborhood in terrible conditions, which was the other side of Oprah's childhood. So there's a negative complex that formed from that. But because her grandmother taught her how to read, Oprah had an imaginative mind. She became close to the farm animals. They were her friends, and she gave them dramatic parts in her stories and games that she played. Positive complex. So some believe that history, that experience, was about why she then moved on to storytelling, playwriting, film scripts, creating films, acting in films. You know, that was the foundation of her way of communication. When Oprah was 14, she gave birth to a baby who died 2 weeks later. We can find this here. Now, in your charts, there's a little circle with a K. That's Chiron, okay? That's the vulnerable place in the chart. And Chiron is in aspect to Pisces, which is all about physical death and symbolic death. And so that would represent, the fifth house is about children. We create children, right? But it wasn't meant to be. These incidents are examples of the darker side of Oprah's life. Now, in 1986, she was identified as the richest African American woman in North America. So this is a function of the planet Venus right here. Venus represents really nice things, like love, affection, creativity, but also money, finances. And it's in another harmonious aspect to this very positive planet, Jupiter, up here, which expands anything that it touches. So, you know, that's a function, that's a positive complex, and that's why she's been able to acquire wealth. Okay. Now, Neptune. We know that Oprah is a very spiritual person. You know, the way she interviewed on her show, you know, just that lasted for how many years? There was always a meaning behind her questions that as the audience listened to it, they learned something about themselves. So there was a lot of care and a lot of service. She's someone who really holds this part. You know, you find this in Mercury in the 6th house. So when we consider that her spiritual bearings involve a very positive, expansive energy, and her gift of interviewing important people has become part of another series that she started, right, Super Soul Sunday, in which she interviews spiritually awakened guests who talk about their transpersonal experiences. Her ability to grasp the significance of their importance lies in her own spiritual awakening. She can relate to those people who are speaking about where they've awakened and how they've awakened. Her life could be a great example of someone who has embraced the psycho-spiritual process. What this means is that because of the psychological wounds that she experienced as a child and as a teenager, she was able to turn around and transform them into a healing lesson and move into a greater level of self-awareness and therefore transpersonal awareness. Okay, I think I'm going to turn it over to general questions.